there are movie stars, and then there are icons. Robert Redford wasn't just another Hollywood face. He was the face. The kind of man whose charm could light up a room and make everyone stop and stare. He had that calm confidence, that effortless style, a mix of mystery and magnetism that few could ever match. But what the cameras never captured was the ache hiding behind that perfect smile. Behind the fame and the flawless image lived a man quietly shaped and scarred by love.
And it ended up being one of the most enjoyable relationships I've ever had.
I saw her on a TV show, and I had never seen her before, and I said, that's it. Whoever she is, I'm going to go with it. I'm going to take a chance.
Now, at 89, Redford is finally revealing the truth about the 6 women who left permanent marks on his heart, each one a chapter of his story. The first wife who believed in him when he was nobody, the glamorous Hollywood star who slipped away before her time, the wild flame he couldn't tame, the close friend who almost became so much more, and finally, the woman who gave his restless heart some peace. These aren't shallow tabloid rumors. They're the hidden truths behind the legend himself. Because Robert Redford's real love stories weren't written in scripts or captured on film. They lived in quiet moments the world never saw. Let's start with the very beginning. Lola van Vagnan, the first love who never really left his soul. Long before the red carpets, the awards, and the magazine covers, there was Lola, a historian, grounded and brilliant, living far away from Hollywood's constant noise. And maybe that's exactly why he fell for her. She wasn't chasing fame. She was real, calm, and solid. She didn't see Robert Redford, the star. She saw Bob, the dreamer who still had dirt on his boots and fire in his eyes. They tied the knot back in 1958 when Redford was just another young man with huge ambitions and empty pockets. The world didn't know his name yet, but Lola did. She stood by him when no one else paid attention. Together, they built a home, raised 4 kids, and tried to hold on to a normal life while Hollywood was knocking at the door. Through chaos, success, and heartbreak, she remained the anchor in his storm. The one who believed long before the spotlight ever found him. Even as fame came knocking louder every single day, Redford's dream started to cost him everything that truly mattered. The very success he had fought tooth and nail for slowly became the storm that tore through his marriage. Hollywood doesn't forgive distance, and Redford's career demanded it constantly. Endless late nights, flights that never seemed to end, and the heavy pressure of being the man everyone wanted. It all built up until the cracks were too deep to hide. By 1985, after almost 3 decades together, Redford and Lola quietly went their separate ways. No screaming headlines, no messy scandals, just 2 people brave enough to accept that love sometimes changes in ways you can't control. Still, even when it was over, Lola never truly left his heart. In later interviews, Redford spoke of her with that quiet, reflective sadness that only comes when you talk about someone who will always mean something. She wasn't just his first wife, she was his anchor during the wildest ride of his life, the one who kept him steady when fame tried to pull him under. And even when anchors are lifted, they leave a mark on the soul forever. Then came number 2, Natalie Wood, the spark that burned bright during Hollywood's golden 1960s. This was an era of flashing bulbs, powerful studios, and paparazzi who chased stars like they were prey. In the middle of that whirlwind, Redford met a woman who looked almost too perfect to be real. Natalie Wood. By then, Natalie was pure Hollywood royalty. She'd grown up on set, transforming from a child star into one of the most magnetic leading ladies the world had ever seen. To Redford, still carving his path, still proving himself, she was both a colleague and a mystery. The kind of woman you couldn't quite understand, but definitely couldn't look away from. They worked side by side in several films, most famously Inside Daisy Clover in 1965, and This Property is Condemned in 1966. Their chemistry was undeniable, the kind that made audiences whisper, "Is this just acting, or is there something more?" Every scene between them felt alive, like the air itself was charged with something real. Redford played the cool, untouchable drifter. Natalie embodied the fragile dreamer chasing something genuine. Together, they mirrored a restless generation that didn't want to settle for anything less than passion and purpose. But behind the cameras, the whispers got louder. People said there was more than friendship between them. something deeper, something that couldn't be scripted. For Natalie, who had spent her entire life under blinding lights, Redford was a rare kind of calm. A man who didn't chase attention, who didn't crave the spotlight. He was private, grounded, and real. And for Redford, Natalie wasn't just another co-star. She was a riddle wrapped in beauty and sorrow. Someone who glowed brighter than anyone else but carried storms no one could see. Those close to Redford later shared that he cared deeply for Natalie, more than most people ever realized. But he also knew the chaos that seemed to follow her everywhere she went. He saw the pressure, the heartbreak, and that deep loneliness that fame could create. Maybe because he was starting to feel it himself. Whatever existed between them, whether it was quiet affection or just an unspoken connection, it stayed with him for life. When Natalie passed away in 1981, it shook him deeply. For Redford, it was a painful reminder that even the brightest lights in Hollywood can fade long before their time. He rarely spoke about her, but whenever her name came up, his whole tone changed. Soft, cautious, almost protective, like he was guarding something too precious to be shared. You could feel the care, the sadness, and the respect behind every word. It was as if talking too much about her might make the fragile memory break apart. Natalie Wood may not have been his forever love, but she was a spark that burned into his soul, fleeting, fragile, and unforgettable. Then came number 3, Barbra Streisand, the storm that could melt even the calmest heart. If Natalie was a spark, Barbra was pure wildfire. When Redford and Streisand came together for The Way We Were in 1973, both were already major icons, but neither expected the kind of explosion that film would ignite. Their chemistry didn't just light up the screen, it set the world on fire. This wasn't your typical Hollywood romance. It was a battle between passion and restraint, between ideals and emotions, between two people headed in totally different directions. Barbra, with her fierce drive and unstoppable energy, poured every ounce of herself into each scene, her voice trembling with emotion, her eyes filled with truth. And then there was Redford, calm, composed, that signature coolness that made every restrained glance feel magnetic. He played his character like a man with 1,000 emotions trapped behind one perfect expression. And that tension made their connection feel real. Every scene sizzled with something unsaid. Off-screen, the connection was just as powerful, but also complicated. Years later, Barbra openly admitted she was absolutely captivated by him, calling Redford the golden boy of Hollywood. For her, he was everything the industry promised but rarely delivered. Elegant, mysterious, effortlessly masculine. But Redford, always private, kept his emotions locked behind tall walls. He admired her deeply and respected her talent, but Barbra's intensity sometimes overwhelmed him. She wanted raw emotion, real, open, untamed. Redford needed calm, balance, and quiet control. It became a dance between two opposites, passion pulling one way, fear pulling the other, and that tension made their story unforgettable. And maybe that's exactly why The Way We Were worked so well, because it wasn't just acting. The audience could feel that push and pull, that mix of longing and restraint, because it was real. The film's heartbreaking ending, where love fades under the weight of time and destiny, mirrored their own dynamic behind the scenes. Years later, Barbra hinted that he might have been the one who slipped away, and maybe she was right. Because for Redford, even if she wasn't the love he kept, she became the one who stayed in the story, the one he could never quite forget. Then came number 4, Sonia Braga, the passion that nearly consumed him. By the late 1980s, Robert Redford wasn't just a movie star anymore. He was a force of nature. Actor, director, producer, the man could build entire cinematic worlds from the ground up. But when Sonia entered his life, everything changed. The Brazilian actress brought an energy that could light up an entire city. She was bold, fiery, and alive in a way that completely disarmed him. Their connection was said to be electric, instant, undeniable, and impossible to hide. Redford had met plenty of beautiful women in his life, but Sonia was different. She wasn't intimidated by his fame or power. She matched his fire with her own. And for a man who had spent decades mastering calm, Sonia's passion was both thrilling and terrifying. She challenged him, pushed him, and reminded him what it felt like to lose control, something Redford rarely allowed himself to do. And though their time together burned bright and fast, It left a mark on him that never faded. Another love story written not in tabloids, but in the quiet corners of his heart. Sonia Braga wasn't just beautiful. She was pure fire, bold, fierce, and completely untamed. Her energy could set a room ablaze. Known around the world for her fearless performances in Dona Flor and her two husbands and Kiss of the Spider-Woman, Braga radiated intensity from every cell of her being. She was heat and heart combined, passion that burned without hesitation or apology. For Robert Redford, a man who had spent most of his life keeping emotions neatly locked behind calm control, she was a shock to the system, a living storm he simply couldn't ignore. Their connection wasn't just about attraction, it ran far deeper, blending culture, emotion, and spirit. She brought the rhythm and fire of Latin America. He brought the quiet balance of California and Utah. She lived raw, open, and fearless, and that wild honesty fascinated and unsettled him all at once. Friends who knew Redford back then said their connection was intense, the kind of love that doesn't ask permission, that consumes you whole. Lola van Vagnan had grounded him. Barbra Streisand had challenged him. But Sonia Braga, she swept him away completely. For the first time, Redford wasn't the calm eye in the storm. He was the storm. But as fiery as it was, that kind of passion never lasts forever. It burns too bright, too fast. Redford had reached a point in his life where he longed for balance and peace, something steady and calm. Braga, on the other hand, thrived in chaos, in emotion, in unpredictability. Their worlds collided beautifully, like thunder and lightning, but they could never quite find equilibrium. Their romance didn't last long, but it branded itself onto his soul. Years later, Redford still spoke of her with that same respect, calling her a force of nature. And that said it all. She wasn't the woman he built a home with, but she was the flame he could never fully extinguish, a living reminder that even the most disciplined man can lose himself in the fire of passion. Then came number 5, Sibylle Szaggars, the woman who finally tamed his heart. By the time Redford met her, he had already lived more than a few lifetimes. He'd been the golden boy of Hollywood, the visionary filmmaker who changed the industry, and the activist who challenged the system head-on. He'd seen it all, the fame, the heartbreak, and that heavy loneliness that comes when the spotlight fades. And then, just when no one expected it, love found him again. Sibylle wasn't an actress, and she had no interest in Hollywood's fame machine. She was an artist, a painter from Germany, whose work pulsed with nature's colors and rhythm. Her art wasn't loud, it was alive, calm, natural, and soulful, the very essence of what had always kept Redford grounded deep down. They met in the 1990s, during a period when Redford had stepped away from the chaos of fame and retreated into the peace of Sundance, Utah. It was there, surrounded by mountains and silence, that he rediscovered what life beyond Hollywood could feel like. And Sibylle fit into that world perfectly. Her calm energy matched his slower rhythm. She didn't crave attention, cameras, or headlines. She found beauty in stillness, peace in color, and meaning in quiet moments. Their love didn't grow under blinding red carpet lights or at glamorous movie premieres. It bloomed quietly, away from the noise, in the kind of simple space where two souls finally find balance. For Redford, who had spent decades surrounded by flashbulbs and expectations, Sibylle was a breath of clean air, proof that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories happen far from the spotlight. Their love grew quietly, far from the noise and chaos that had followed Robert Redford for decades. It bloomed in the stillness of the mountains, among the forests, in those rare spaces where they could simply be. No cameras, no flashing lights, just peace. After more than 10 years together, they decided to make it official in 2009, marrying in a small private ceremony in Hamburg, Germany. No media circus, no paparazzi waiting outside, just two souls choosing each other in silence. Sibylle became more than just his partner. She became his calm, the still water after a lifetime of storms. For Redford, she wasn't just love. She was peace itself, the one who could sit beside him and make the quiet feel alive. After decades of chasing passion, heartbreak, and success, she gave him something he didn't know he was missing: stillness. Now, at 89, when Redford reflects on his life, it's clear that Sibylle isn't just another chapter. She's the balance he searched for all along. If wild passion once set his world on fire, she became the cool calm that finally soothed it. Because sometimes, steady peace is the most powerful kind of love there is. Then came number 6, Jane Fonda, the bond that always lingered near love but never quite crossed into it. Few Hollywood pairings ever felt as natural as Robert Redford and Jane Fonda. From their first appearance together in Barefoot in the Park, 1967, audiences were instantly captivated. Their chemistry was effortless, playful, and completely real. It made people believe they were meant for each other, both on and off screen. When they reunited for The Electric Horseman in 1979 and again in Our Souls at Night in 2017, that spark didn't just return, it glowed brighter than ever. Older, wiser, and calmer, their connection still carried the same warmth it always had. Watching them together felt timeless, like two old friends who never really drifted apart. But behind the charm and laughter, something fascinating lingered. They were never lovers. What they shared wasn't romance. It was something deeper, a connection that hovered right next to love, but stayed unspoken. Redford admired Jane's strength, her fearless activism, her sharp intelligence, and her refusal to stay quiet in a world that often told women to. She was bold, courageous, and impossible to ignore. Jane, on her part, never hid her soft spot for him. She even admitted once that she wished they had been more than co-stars. But timing is everything, and theirs never lined up. Redford was private and careful with his emotions, while Jane lived her life out loud, unapologetically. Maybe he feared that crossing that line would risk the rare trust they had built. Or maybe he understood that some bonds are too precious to gamble with. When they reunited in Our Souls at Night, it felt like life had brought them full circle. They played two widowed neighbors rediscovering love later in life. But to fans, it felt real, almost like a glimpse into what might have been. It wasn't about pretending anymore. It was about connection, history, and a kind of emotional truth that can't be faked. Jane Fonda wasn't a lost love. She was a reminder of one. Proof that not every story of the heart has to be lived to be real. Some loves are meant to be felt quietly, deeply, and forever. Robert Redford's life might look golden from the outside, fame, beauty, and timeless success. But behind that shine was a man shaped by love and loss. From Lola van Vagnan, the woman who gave him family, to Natalie Wood, whose fragile spirit stayed with him, to Barbra Streisand's fierce fire, to Sonia Braga's unstoppable passion, to Sibylle Szaggars, who gave him peace, and finally, Jane Fonda, the friend who might have been more. Each woman left a mark that shaped the legend himself. At 89, his real legacy isn't just the movies or awards. It's the women who helped him feel, grow, and stay human in a world that often forgets how fragile the heart really is. Robert Redford was never chasing stardom. He was chasing meaning. He didn't crave the applause or the spotlight. He wanted purpose. Every triumph, every heartbreak, and every love in his life shaped him into a man who valued silence more than fame itself. People always saw the legend, the Sundance Kid, the golden Hollywood icon. But behind the scenes, he was quiet, reflective, even guarded. Fame didn't thrill him. It drained him. He once said, "The higher you climb, the lonelier the air gets." And he lived every bit of that truth. The red carpets, the flashing lights, that wasn't his world. His real world was built around nature, family, and storytelling that actually meant something. By the 1990s, Redford had transformed from movie star to mentor, a man who opened doors for others and gave dreamers a real chance to be heard. That's when he created the Sundance Institute, a place where independent artists and voices outside Hollywood's system could finally step into the light. He wasn't just making films anymore, he was building a movement. Young directors, writers, and actors who didn't fit the traditional mold found their path because of him. But even as he built that legacy, the emotional weight of his past never truly disappeared. Those closest to Redford said he often looked back on the people who shaped him, not just the women who loved him, but the losses that left scars. Early in his life, he lost a child, a heartbreak that followed him for decades. Maybe that's why his eyes always held a trace of sadness. even in moments of joy. It's the kind of pain that doesn't fade. It just teaches you to treasure peace after surviving chaos. Even in his later years, Redford carried that balance between light and shadow. On one hand, the silver-haired icon who had lived the dream, and on the other, the humble man grounded by time, loss, and love that never really left him. He once said he didn't like looking back too much, but when he did, it was with gratitude, never regret. By his late 80s, Hollywood had changed completely, but Redford's influence remained untouchable. Younger stars called him the real deal. Directors said he was one of the few artists who never lost his soul. And it's true, even after decades in an industry that burns people out, Redford stayed authentic. No scandals, no meltdowns, just honesty, craft, and quiet rebellion. He became Hollywood's quiet rebel, the man who played by his own rules and still came out on top, not by chasing attention, but by creating real meaning in everything he touched. His story isn't just about fame or romance. It's about endurance. It's about a life that burned bright but never lost itself in the flames. And through it all, there was one constant: Sibylle, the love that stayed. She became his balance, his home base, his peace. Together, they built a world far away from the noise, a space where calm replaced chaos. Friends say that when you see them together, it's peaceful. No drama, no pretension. Just two people who understand what peace really means. For a man who lived through so much, that quiet harmony might be the greatest ending of all. But here's what makes Redford truly special. He never cared for endings. He always believed stories go on, even after the screen fades to black. His story continues through his films, through Sundance, and through every artist who dared to dream because of him. Now, at 89, when he flashes that same warm smile that once melted hearts across the world, you can still see it all. The dreamer from California, the devoted husband, the loyal friend, the artist who never stopped believing. He's living proof that fame fades, but legacy doesn't. Because Robert Redford didn't just play heroes, he lived like one. Maybe that's the real secret behind the legend. He wasn't trying to be larger than life. He was just trying to live it honestly, fully, and without fear. And that's why even now, long after the credits roll, his story still shines just as bright. So, which moment or love story hit you the hardest? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know what touched your heart the most. Smash that like button if you felt something real. Share this with someone who loves classic Hollywood, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that go beyond the spotlight. See you on the next one.